turn me on. Groove is your true nature. And it never gets hard enough for you. You've been enchanting this heart of mine for the longest time. Slow dancer, you stun me up with all your romancing, and it's making me weak like no one else, like there's no one else in the world. I'm under your spell, baby. This is our time. The dance floor is jumping. Move me tonight, boy. You got something that makes me feel like I'm at the top of the world. Spin me around and around, and this is our time. The dance floor is jumping. Move me tonight, boy. You got something that makes me feel like I'm at the top of the world. Spin me around and around, yeah. Dance with me. The music is making me so dizzy. I need to give in to the strong rhythm, 'cause I'm beginning to break free. Be here with me. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. Be here with me. This is our time. The dance floor is jumping. Move me tonight, boy. You got something that makes me feel like I'm at the top of the world. Spin me around and around, and this is our time. The dance floor is jumping. Move me tonight, boy. You got something that makes me feel like I'm at the top of the world. Round and around, yeah. I'm at the top of the world. I'm at the top of the world. I'm at the top of the world. Spin me around, round and around.
Honey, I got what you want. Give me all of your love, 'cause it's burning hot. It's what you do to me, babe, I can guarantee. Honey, I got what you need. Under the night sky, I want your eyes all on me. Don't tell me lies now, I always get mine. Don't play with me. Do you want it? Can you feel me? Can you handle it? Right? Do you want it? Don't put your love on hold. I can't take it anymore. Oh, put your love on me now. Trust me and you will see. Oh, honey, I got what you want. Honey, I got what you need. Honey, I got what you want. Honey, I got what you need. Give me your love, no holding back, no. We could take it to the stars, where you wanna go. The things that we can do, don't need to prove you know. Honey, I got what you want. Yeah, under the night sky, I want your eyes all on me. Don't tell me no lies, I always get mine. Don't play with me, so do
have found a playlist that isn't going to get silenced. How are you doing with AV Druid? Awesome. So spring has really sprung, hasn't it? And we've pulled out the radish. No, it's not a radish, is it? It's a tiny turnip. All right, you go back to your spot and knock everything off the wall in the meantime. Happy Friday Eve, you guys. As always, the week goes by way too fast. I'm like, it's almost the weekend again. So yeah. So today I have a bunch of little randomies, and then we're going to do another chapter with Flo Peto, and I have something cool to show you. You may have already seen it if you joined me and Jill on Tuesday, but it was a very funny coincidental thing that happened on Monday that I wanted to share with you. And it was a happy mail day. You know, these days, it's not often a happy mail day. And used to be like all I got was junk mail and bills. And then I moved all my bills online. And then it was just junk mail. And so even junk mail these days has dwindled. And, you know, it's mostly just like stuff from the credit card companies and the local tree and roofing people we get flyers from. So usually the mail is like, I don't even bother to go get it. But today there were multiple things. So first of all, and this is if we have time, my issue of Fiber Art Now came. And, you know, this is such an amazing magazine. If you subscribe to Quilt Folk or are on their mailing list, I mean, you don't have to subscribe to, you know, be on their mailing list, but they are sort of sister magazines now. I think it was 2 years ago. Mike at Quilt Folk, I think I don't know if he purchased or did a merger, whatever it was. He took over Quilt Folk as the managing editor, or I can't remember what titles and publishing are, but anyway, he brought this under the Quilt Folk umbrella, and it was a great magazine before. It is an incredible magazine now. So there's some cool articles in it. I was flipping through, and I'll share them if we have time. The next wonderful thing is I got my membership package from the Baltimore Applique Society. So I did a lecture for them recently, my Dr. Dunton lecture, and you know, it's been like years that I've known who they were, and I kept meaning to join. And where they meet is not terribly far from where I live, so it's not, you know, that big of a deal to drive down there when they have a, you know, in-person meeting. And so I got my membership card, and then they sent me this really cool little template to make. I don't know if you can see this. This is Baltimore Applique Society, and it's got this little design. So I can make a name badge. And I have been terrible about having a name badge. You know, I go to events like QuiltCon and other stuff, and people always have these beautiful, cute, you know, lovingly made, funny, handmade name badges. And I've always, you know, tried to make one and never finished one because, like, it's always last minute. So I'm going to take some time and actually make this one and maybe do a quilty one so that I actually have. Hey, Molly. Glad to see you. So yeah, that. And also my husband's birthday present came, and he does not watch the stream, so not spoiling anything. But if anybody is a birder, I have a suggestion for binoculars. Waterproof binoculars he wanted because he does photography, and he's actually pretty good. So anyway, he wanted a new set of binoculars for his birthday, so those came today. And then amongst all of this wonderful mail, I just had to share this because I was gobsmacked when I got this. So it was my husband's mail, but you know, he doesn't care. He's like, you know, I deal with the bills and stuff. So, so he has a credit card. I believe it is a MasterCard. And, you know, they send you those things, activate and enjoy this promotional APR of 0%, right? So we have this 0%. And then, you guys, guess what the variable APR is? So this is a thing that, I guess, these new purchases, I guess, after April 1st of 2025, I don't think I've ever seen an interest rate this high, and I'm pretty sure this is usury. Hey guys, I don't know if you've ever done any research on, financial stuffs and interest rates. I truly thought interest rates could not be over a certain percentage in the 20s, like, I don't know, 28% or something. These fools are saying 30%, 30.49% APR if you do this deal. So it's like, go buy something big, like, new appliances, and then you don't have to pay it until April of next year. But as of right now, the variable APR is 30%. Yes, I mean, it is all usury, yes. But, the vagaries of how our economic system in the United States and similar economies work, it's complicated. I worked in the finance industry for a long time, and it's just complicated, and there's a lot to be, angry about. But I just was like 30%. I mean, I just can't even. So yeah, I just had to share that, because my husband is not home right now, and I know he would just roll his eyes at it, because he doesn't use the credit card. That's the funny thing. Like, we keep our credit cards paid off and all that stuff. So anyway, I just had to share that because I was like, this has got to be a misprint. Really. Maybe they mean 3.49%. Wouldn't that be nice? No, that is not what they mean. So anyway, that was my fun, happy mail and my ridiculous mail of the day. So a couple other things I wanted to show you. So first of all, I'm actually going to share my screen. Okay, let me share my screen. Let me move the chat. There's never a good place to move the chat. So, if you are in the area, the Smithsonian has this Pattern and Paradox, the Quilts of Amish Women show right now. And I'm not exactly sure. I literally think it opened like last week, I think. But anyway, I mean, look at this. This is, I think this is the quilt that has kind of been shown as like the quilt for the show. And, at first glance, I would have never guessed that this was an Amish quilt. The central, this big central star says Amish, right? And it's black and blue, and those are very Amish colors. But these, sort of improvisational, crazy piece. I mean, it looks like they're kind of pieced like maybe, not even. I mean, in some cases it looks like they're kind of pieced like log cabins, but not really. I mean, this is truly improvisational piecing like you often see with, modern quilts. So this just like blew me away when I saw this, and it's circa 1920. So, no offense, modern quilters, but you did not make this up. The Amish were doing this in the 20s. So, yeah, I mean, just gorgeous. But anyway, so this show, yes, it did just open. And I'm not going to read all this to you, but there are some events going on. So, there's a gallery talk coming up, which is already sold out. And then on May 23rd, and you know what, let me put the link in the chat so that you can go here yourself. I did actually prepare my links for once, and now I can't open them. All right, we'll just do this. So this gallery talk by Yannick Smucker, she is, oh gosh, what university does she work for? She's a professor, and she does a lot of really cool stuff in our world. She has a podcast with the Quilt Alliance, and so she's doing stuff that kind of dovetails with the Quilters Save Our Stories. And she's done a lot of research on Amish quilts. Her most recent book is actually about the WPA period, so, Depression era stuff. But she's done some really amazing work, and she actually has, I think it's 2 other books about Amish quilts that came out before her current one. So anyway, she is just, I mean, a powerhouse of really wonderful quilt study stuff. So the cool thing about this event on May 23rd is you can do a virtual. So they're going to be offering it as in person or virtual. And I kept thinking, oh, can I get down there? Like, the month of May is a little crazy for me. And then I realized just do it through, I guess it's going to be Zoom or whatever. So sign up for that if you are interested in this. Definitely. And then there's another gallery talk the next day, and I suspect that this one is in person only. So definitely look at the Annika Smucker one. And it's just right here on this page that I put in. So there's that. And then, I had to give myself a little plug. I have a show that opened on Friday, May 22nd at the Garrett Museum of Art in Garrett, Indiana. I thought it was like really close to Illinois, but I think it's a little bit easterly of Indiana. Of course, I've been to Indiana, but I just, in my mind, I cannot picture where stuff is in the state. So one of my very, very good friends lives there, and she said, of course I'm going to go to your show. And I was like, I thought it was like really far away. And she's like, nah. So I don't know. But the show is called Miniatures Conjure Delights. And the backstory on this is a friend of mine that I met many years ago through a Midwest craft thing. She started a thimble gallery, basically a tiny gallery. And you probably have seen some of these. For a while, there was these tiny galleries that were like, the Boy Scout project where you have the tiny library, like people will have it in front of their house or, in front of a business or something. And it's, it looks like a little birdhouse, like, right there, but it's got library books in it. And, they're protected from the elements, and you go in there, you put a book in, you take one out. Well, at some point people started doing that with these little galleries. And so my friend Elaine kind of got involved with this. Hey, Jill. My friend Elaine got involved with this whole group of people that were, literally internationally, worldwide, doing these tiny galleries. And so I did a solo show with her last year, and that was all online. But she has been able to take her little galleries different places. And so the Garrett Museum of Art, she worked with them, and they wanted to do this, like, big miniatures kind of thing. And so it is... And their marketing pieces are very pretty, but don't really tell you what's going on here. They basically it's a gallery full of tiny galleries. And so I have my own tiny gallery, and you can see it here. And so these are tiny pieces that I have made over a period of time. And her little galleries are so cute. They do all these like neat, did I just heart that? It's weird. They use Playmobil people. Like this is some of this stuff she has developed herself, and some of it is just part of this community where they do this. And so they use the Playmobil people, and then she buys like this miniature food and stuff. It's so cute. She sent me a thing, like a little wine and cheese thing when my first show with her. It's amazing. And so these are literally these little dollhouse sized boxes that, have a art show in it. And in this particular show, there's 14 of us. So, I highly recommend that you go look at her site. And let me put her gallery info in here. And just look at some of these artists. Obviously, I want you to look at my stuff. But look at these other artists. There is this one artist. Like, I have to show you this. This artist, and this might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but they're basically pictures of people swimming, like, through pool water. And they're tiny, tiny. But they're not paintings. They're actually made with polymer clay. And I have no idea how this artist does it. But apparently she like takes little bits and puts it in there, onto some kind of substrate. And it ends up like after all of this working with the clay, she ends up with these pictures that look like paintings. And they're just so amazing. And there's, several other artists that are just like mind blowing. So this show is up through May. So she's posting every day. She's posting a new artist. And so this was yesterday's. This is a painter, I think a watercolor painter. So just really cool stuff. And I mean, I have to say it's really fun. Let me put Garrett's thing in there. I'll give them a little plug. But it's just really fun stuff. And you know, I've really enjoyed being able to work tiny like that. I like to work small anyway. So having the opportunity to make these itty bitty little quilts has been really fun. And I've already sold 2 of them. So opening night, I sold 2. And so that's the other cool thing that I have to say about making tiny quilts. People are more willing to buy your tiny quilts because they're more affordable. And, you know, pricing is based on, you know, all the stuff, you know, how time consuming, all that kind of thing. So if you think about, you know, pricing of a very large quilt, then you can imagine the pricing of a tiny little quilt is going to be more affordable. So thanks, Mod Art, and hello. So yeah, and if you, I mean, if this is a kind of thing that is interesting to you, like look at who Angelica Kaufman, the Angelica Kaufman Gallery, which is my friend Elaine, look and see who she's following, because there are all of these other galleries out there. There's one, I think, in Australia or New Zealand that I follow. So yeah, they're worldwide, and there's actually like a tiny gallery organization and everything. So really neat stuff. Okay, so I think that's the big stuff. So as far as announcements, next week, if you followed along with, if you're following along with Quilt Nerding on Tuesday nights, you'll know Jill and I talked about this. We are going to be in Pennsylvania next week. I think it's not till the end of the week that we go. So Monday's show will be normal-ish, although I'll talk about that in a minute. But then the normal time Thursday will be canceled because I will probably just be driving up to Pennsylvania. So we'll probably do like a pop-up sometime, maybe Thursday night, maybe Friday, maybe Saturday. Kind of depends because we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on. But between the two of us, I will make sure that we post it here. I'll put something on the schedule, but also on the Cake TV Facebook page and the Quilt Nerding Facebook group, which you do have to join if because I think it's a closed group. But I mean, you don't have to prove anything, you know, you just have to prove that you're not a bot. So yeah, so I will get to that in a minute. But Monday, I have to figure out what we're gonna do because you guys, I'm in the 80 to 90% path of the eclipse. And I started thinking about it. You know, I mean, I've kind of been watching the news about it since, you know, Slow News Day, and they started plugging it. I did watch the 2017 eclipse, although that one was not, I don't remember what our percentage was here. I don't think it was as high as the 80 to 90. So I'm thinking, you know, we're not going to be totality, obviously, but we're pretty close to the swath. So I thought it'd be really cool to go out there, and especially, oh, you're in totality, Molly. I'm so jealous. I've never, ever been, you know, able to get to a place when there's been an eclipse. I know that there's this, like, eclipse chasers and stuff. Hey, Moro Dem. So, yeah, I want to do something on Monday, and especially for you guys who, Nashville had totality. Oh, so cool. Especially for you guys who aren't anywhere close to the path. I could at least go outside. And I guess I probably need to get those glasses, but at least maybe I could stream the darkening. And you know, they always talk about how, like, oh, the animals go crazy as it gets dark, and I'm like, wow. You know, I don't necessarily remember all this from 2017. I do remember, you know, if you they always tell you stand with your back to the sun, and then, you know, you can use a colander or something with a hole poked in it, and you can you know, project the eclipse happening. And I did that, and it was cool. But yeah, do they get loud like nighttime? Okay. You know, and the thing is, or do you guys are chasers? Yeah, it's funny. I do, yes, Paducah definitely is in totality because I have a couple of friends that live there in that area and they have been talking about it. Um, and if you follow Cheryl Sloboda, she owns, I think her store is called Muppin. Definitely her online name is Muppin, Muppin. She owns a brick and mortar store there in Paducah, and I think they're doing all kinds of Eclipse stuff. But it's funny, like I kept trying to think, like in terms of my adult life, I want to say the 2017 Eclipse was like the last one, or the only one in my, yes, Muppin Sewing Emporium. Um, the so what I was, yes, Monarch, that's what I was about to say. The shoebox with the pinhole was when I was in elementary school, maybe fifth grade. I'm trying to remember. I think it actually might have been like fifth or sixth grade. But anyway, we did those, and I was kind of like, meh. Like I just really didn't care that much. And now I'm like, why was I so lackadaisical about it as a kid? Because this is something, it doesn't come along, every year. I remember when Haley's Comet came through. Haley's Comet came through when I was pregnant with my son. And we knew he was going to be a boy, but there was like this, there's that tiny like 2% chance that they made a mistake on the sonogram. So I kept saying, if this is a girl, she's going to be named Haley. And my husband was like, oh God, you're one of those people that would name your kid after. But I thought, I thought it would be cool. Anyway, luckily my child was a boy. So, so I'm thinking about it now. And I think, the people that do the eclipse chasing and kind of go all to all these places all over the world where people congregate, like how cool. Because I do know it's a big deal, for the totality. So anyway, there's actually, I want to say it's about 4 or 5 hour drive from here would get us into totality in Pennsylvania. But I don't have the resources necessarily to do that. So we'll have to get by with 80 to 90%, but I thought it would be fun on Monday to try to do something like that. I think the eclipse is going to be happening at like, I don't know, it's like 3:20 here. So I thought maybe we could do something with, I don't know, astronomical, meteorological quilts. I have a couple in mind. So we'll figure that out on Monday. But I wanted to let you know, Monday might be a little, technology crazy depending on what I figure out. And so, again, Thursday will be canceled, but we'll have some kind of pop-up. And then I still need to talk to Jill. I'm glad you're here, but we gotta get together after this because she had possibly brought up us maybe doing a pop-up this weekend, and we gotta figure out the details of that. So just keep an eye out for that. We'll announce it if we're doing something. And it'll be, I think, sometime on Saturday. There's an auction that's coming up, and we thought maybe we would stream it, but we got to figure out like what's going on with the auction. So stay tuned. Let's see. I think that was everything. Yeah. So the thing I wanted to show you, if you remember on Monday, we started reading this book. And I had flipped through it, and I had said, I'm going to cut off after that first chapter. But I said, look, Cake and Jill all over the place. Yes. But I had said, look at this cool quilt, right? And I had said, I looked in the information, and it's just, she only had this detail of it. But I looked, and it was Bertha Stange's collection, and we know Bertha Stange was a major important person in this mid 20th century quilter, and all it says in here is from the collection of Mrs. Bertha Stange. So I didn't know, did she make it or not? Well, indeed, Mrs. Bertha Stange did make that quilt. Let me show you. We just finished reading this awesome book in quilt nerding, and as you guys, if you follow along, that the show has kind of that stream has kind of become a little bit of a book club right now, but we are doing a whole bunch of different stuff. So all right, let me find it. Where'd it go? Here it is. So still only a little bit of a detail, but it's a better detail. But look at that. And isn't it beautiful in color? And so what was really funny is I showed you guys that picture out of Quilts and Coverlets, American Quilts and Coverlets on Monday, because I had just, been flipping through and I was like, I should show you guys this. Well, Monday night, being the procrastinator that I am, I was doing my reading for the quilt nerding stream, and I came across that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the serendipity. I don't know. Sometimes those things just happen, and so that was really cool. So I wanted to make sure you guys got to see it in color, and I just love that quilt. It's a cool quilt. The fact that it was made, I think early 20th century. I just closed the book. I didn't grab the date, but it's definitely before 1949. And I think somebody said that it was like the 20s or the 30s that she actually made. I think probably the 30s. So anyway, it's just a cool quilt. And, I get so excited as we study some of these women that, they're making these, just really beautiful, well-crafted quilts. And, like Florence also collecting these just amazing antique quilts. And then they're making stuff they're finding stuff that is so unique. I just feel like when you think about mid-century, you're picturing, or at least I am, picturing like really traditional looking quilts. And, still stuff that's, from a historical perspective, they're pulling out the finery. So anyway, I just am in love with that quilt. So, I'm gonna find the full picture of it and find out where it is. And if anybody is reading ahead and wants to look for it and let me know, I would appreciate that too. So, and I guess one more plug for quilt nerding, just because we're having so much fun over there. If you get tired of me talking nonstop, you should go over to quilt nerding, because sometimes it's Jill talking. But this is the book that we're reading next. Antique American Needlework Tools. And this is written by a friend of ours, Dawn Ronigan. And it is, if you like antique needlework tools, the stuff that Jill has in her inventory that she's, often posting on Instagram to sell, the stuff that you see in antique stores. And so that's the kind of stuff that's in here. And it is so cool. It's so interesting. So definitely check out Quilt Nerding. We're on Instagram and YouTube. And the details are on Instagram, and then we have the Facebook page, so our Facebook group. Well, I can't keep all that stuff straight. So anyway, check that out. Now, are we ready to get back to Florence Peto? Now, one thing, how I have problem with dust jackets. So I pulled the dust jacket off the other day so that it didn't get all crumpled, and I noticed that she has this little motif embossed on the cover. And I thought to myself, and I might have even said this, wow, that looks like the Marie Webster whirling tulips. And then I went about my business. And then I want to say it was yesterday morning, I was working on something and I looked at this again and I said, let me look at Marie Webster's whirling tulips quilt pattern. That's what this is. It is not similar. It is Marie Webster's whirling tulips. And that surprised me. So, in Dr. Dunton's book, there's that, it's a wreath. And so I think that's something that he drafted. So, when I go back to the museum, I'm checking on that. But I was just so surprised to see this. And if you've watched my Dr. Dunton lecture, which, reminder, you only have through this weekend to watch that, you'll see this. This particular pattern, his patients at Shepherd Pratt made a quilt out of this pattern. And they did a really good job. And I'm trying to remember, the pictures he has, it's only as a quilt top. So, but you'll see this in the lecture. And what's really interesting is Marie Webster, this is what all of the blocks look like. The tulips are spinning clockwise. In the Shepherd Pratt quilt, and I don't know if this was a design choice or if they made a mistake, but the top row of tulips look like this, and the bottom row of tulips look like this, but their middle row, and I think it's like 3 blocks, the tulips spin the other way. They're counterclockwise, which I kind of liked. I thought it was a nice design choice. But anyway, these connections that you keep finding between all of these, 20th century quilters and stuff are just amazing. So let us get into it. We left off. My book is getting a little. So we had gotten from. So we did 1748 to 1800. Oh, you have a whirling tulips in your inventory? I don't think I realized that. Interesting. Did I know that? You probably did tell me that. Okay, so chapter 2, and again, this is American Quilts and Coverlets by Flo Peto, and this was published in 1949. I definitely knew that, okay. Sorry. The cake's brain is like a colander. Hey, Ivy. All right, so this is chapter 2, 1800 to 1840. Now, this will be interesting because 1840 is right there where, or within a couple of years before Baltimore album quilts take off. So I have not necessarily read ahead. I've only looked at the pictures. So I guess we're going to find out, when she gets to 1840 to 1948, which is a weird era in the next chapter. I guess we'll find out if she talks about Baltimore album quilts. All right. So, chapter 2, 1800 to 1840. It is not wise to be didactic about the nomenclature of quilt patterns. Oh, Florence, she starts right off. 18th century designs rarely had individual names, but hundreds of whimsical and fantastic titles were given to those unit patterns, which, assembled and repeat, became so popular later. The names reflected political enthusiasms, regional folklore, and religious feelings. They were subject to change as they migrated or as current events captured the imagination of quilt makers. Rocky Glen in the mountains becomes Little Lost Ship on the coast, and Kansas Troubles later in its history. Job's Tears in religious-minded New England became Texas Tears during the stormy debates in Congress about the advisability of admitting another slave state to the Union. The name the quilt maker called her quilt is a clue to help date it and locate the place of its making. A simple 8-point star known to old-time pieceworkers as the variable star suddenly sprang into amazing popularity when christened Old Tippecanoe and Tyler too. The campaign slogan of that dowdy old cider barrel and log cabin hero and frontier fighter, William Henry Harrison. I'm guessing cider barrel and log cabin hero. Those don't sound like, they don't sound like nice words. They don't necessarily sound like fighting words, but now here's an interesting thing. The name the quilt maker called her quilt is a clue to help date it and locate the place of its making. Well, the thing is, you have to know what the maker called it. And when you find a quilt in the wild with no provenance, no family history associated with it or whatever, I don't think that that's necessarily the best advice on dating a quilt. Because if you do know what the maker called it, you probably know who the maker is or have some general idea. So, anyway. Harrison became 9th President of the United States in 1840 during one of the most colorful periods in American history. After all the excitement and final triumph, he died 1 month after entering office. Poor William Henry Harrison. Women may not have had suffrage, but they were aware of and alert to the political issues of their day. Lincoln's platform is said to have been made during the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates in Illinois, and the opposition was not caught napping. They produced The Little Giant to honor Stephen Douglas, short of stature, but dynamic in spirit. Mary Totten of Staten Island, New York, born in 1781, willed her Rising Sun quilt, which is a pretty well-known quilt. Let me find a picture of it. you have surely heard of Mary Totten's Rising Sun. And if you didn't know that's what it was called, you've probably seen it. It's a pretty famous old quilt. But I mean, look at this thing. Yowza. Beautiful. There's a little detail of the border. And what does it say? She says, Mary Totten's Rising Sun, the large 8-point piece star known by different names, which we know. It's a Lone Star. It's a Star of Bethlehem. Called for expert handling. The lavish applique in the corners and right angles is virtually never attempted today. Well, Florence, it is attempted today, though. That's kind of interesting that she says that. So she's writing this in the 40s. We know that the 40s were sort of, it wasn't necessarily a time where quilts were not being made, but it was a time when less quilts were being made because we were at war. The early 40s, by 1949, things have changed a bit, but, early to mid 40s, we're dealing with World War II. So women oftentimes are, a lot of women are in the workforce because the men are fighting. And there's not enough time to be making quilts. So, anyway. So Mary Totten willed her Rising Sun quilt to her niece, and many other wills have recorded legacy quilts by name. I want to say that Mary Totten, and forgive me if I'm wrong, you guys, but I want to say Mary Totten's Rising Sun is in a major museum. I don't know, Smithsonian, Newark, Shelburne, one of those. I feel like one of those museums has it. I could be wrong, though. So Mary's Rising Sun, a truly magnificent piece of work, employs elaborate applique of cut-out chintz motifs together with blossoms, buds, and stemming of calico. Buds and the 2 chained bud borders are done in the rare reverse applique described before. I think she talked about that in chapter 1. Colors rival those in a Persian rug. Dark greens, plum, crimson, and wine reds, rose beige, light, and dark blues and gold. Sounds like a beautiful quilt. This same pieced composition made in Baltimore about 1820 was called the Star of Bethlehem. And so that is this one. Very similar in construction, I guess. You kind of got the right angles, up here in the corners, and then you have like a triangular setting here. And so this one, I don't think this one pops as much in black and white, probably because the values are very similar. So you don't see the star as well. The formation of an 8-point star leaves 4 corners and 4 right angles on which may be placed complementary decoration. Often this was quilting stitchery. On the pictured spread, pieced stars and half stars fill the spaces. So yeah, this is, let's look. In the case of Mary Totten's quilt, she's got this, which sounds like it's applique and possibly reverse applique maybe. But this one has the pieced stars instead. So, again, just like, beautiful work. On the textiles are French and English cotton prints combined with finely woven homespun, and the quilting has been done in homespun linen thread. Yowza. Linen thread. Subdued tones of brown, yellow, rose, tan, and blue prevail. A border of unglazed chintz in chocolate brown patterned in yellow frames the picture. A sharp divergence in an otherwise perfect harmony of color happens in one right-angled space where an orange material flowered in bright blue surprises the beholder. So I don't know where exactly she's talking about, but you'd have to see this in person or in color. The artifice was deliberate and not the expedience of a quilt maker who had run out of matching material. Okay. In certain localities, superstitious quilt makers, Florence Peto is probably the person that started this rumor. You're going to know exactly what it is when I tell you. In certain localities, superstitious quilt makers tried in this way to divert the evil eye. which otherwise might be cast jealously on human endeavor. It was analogous to the Oriental idea that to make a perfect thing is to imitate the deity, therefore unlucky and presumptuous. So you hear this story, and where this story comes from, and I've seen where she wrote about this before, and when she says the Oriental idea, what she's talking about is rug makers. So like Turkish and Middle Eastern rug makers. And supposedly, they will make some type of, error because imitating, a higher power is wrong. I think that is also probably a BS story, but, it comes down to us. And then from that, casting away the evil eye, from Turkish rug makers, we then get this story about Amish quilt makers who purposefully make a mistake. And it's like, no, none of those stories are true. They sound good, but they're simply not true. So, judging from the number of quilts showing the diagonal arrangement of pieced squares known to quilt makers as the Irish chain, it was a dearly loved pattern over a long period of years. So look at this one. Is an interesting early example that is signed and dated. So let's look at that one. Okay, this is a tiny picture. But nonetheless, gorgeous. And it's funny, I have never seen an Irish chain with, some kind of pictures. And these look like appliques of flowers or something. This says, detail from a pattern familiar to and loved by every old-time quilt maker. Oh, okay, so they're chintz. Those are chintz cutouts. Notice cutout chintz and toile motifs placed in the squares formed by the piece design. So, and that's chintz then. So that's that, I guess, embroidery purse or broderie purse where, you cut out the flowers and stuff from chintz and then applique it down. So that quilt is signed and dated Anne Maria Warner, 1822. Wine reds, dark blue, and blue-green calicos comprise the chain, onto which open spaces, which offered opportunity for a variety of decoration, have been appliqued motifs cut from scenic toiles and chintzes. These alternate with nosegays fashioned of floral chintz and small pattern calicos. Yeah, that's interesting because I've just never seen I've seen a number of Irish chains, but I've never seen one that used, imagery or had applique on it as well. The background material is homespun. There were double and triple Irish chains, and the pattern was made in the colonies and in the young states, both north and south. And so essentially, Irish chain is kind of, I want to say it's really just kind of 4 patches, but because they're set on a diagonal is how they make this sort of chain look. But you can see those are overlapping 4 patches essentially. And then, where you work in the white pieces for those open spaces. I took a class one time where we kind of worked on an Irish chain. And you can do a lot of chain piecing with an Irish chain. But I never finished it. And I got to think, it's packed away somewhere. It's one of those things I need to pull out and finish. But they're actually pretty easy to construct. You just have to, be very meticulous about getting your points to match. Also prized are the all-white spreads, which look so elegant and patrician when they grace a gleaming bedstead of old mahogany. I think Florence, she definitely had this, idea about, grace and elegance. The loom-made tufted type used candle wicking for the warp of the foundation, and this heavy yarn at the same time supplied the characteristic popcorn decoration. And so what she's talking about here are the bedspreads that have that little tuft pulled up. And they are similar to candle wicking, but it's that little tuft. And we'll look at the picture in a second. You guys are going to know what it is because they still make these, or at least in this 70s and 80s they were, because my grandmothers both had them. And I think my mom did too. So there were two processes, both laborious. When both foundation and tufting were made on the loom, the roving was picked up in loops over wires where the knots, or popcorns, were required for the often complicated design. This process shows a smooth reverse side. Ooh, chenille. Yeah, chenille is, I think chenille is made the similar way, maybe. I guess depending on like how dense the chenille is. It's made similarly, then it's cut, whereas these are not. So the second process used a loomed base, still employing candle wicking, which made the same ribbed foundation, but the decoration was done by hand. Instead of wires, the hand workers sometimes used turkey wing bones to hold the knots in place while the roving was looped over and drawn through. The bones were removed easily as the work progressed. Why turkey bones? I mean, I'm sure they were a useful tool, but I wonder if there's some specific size of turkey wing bones that makes a difference. That is very odd. That's interesting. So, I mean, she's still referring to candle wicking, but I feel like the candle wick, we talked about this the other day. Candle wicking is, you know, the knot, but also other embroidery, which you guys taught me that. I did not know that candle wicking involved other. Is that the origin of the name turkey stitch and embroidery? Actually, no. I have researched turkey stitch, and turkey stitch and embroidery is called the turkey stitch because it mimics Turkish rugs. So that's where that comes from. But I don't know. Maybe people thought, turkey work, turkey stitch. Well, maybe that's what I need to use these turkey bones for. How strange. And the question is, where does Florence get this intel? She's not a person to have, footnotes and endnotes. So I truly do not know where she gets this data, other than, I guess, interviewing people when she would buy these quilts or study these quilts. She was the kind of woman that would go, like, literally drive through the country, knock on doors. I know there's a lot of people in the 20th century that were doing that to get these, these amazing old quilts, to look at them or purchase them. I just can't imagine doing that. Like, my grandmother used to do that kind of stuff with, about antique furniture. She'd see something sitting out on somebody's porch, and she'd just go right up, knock on the door. You want to sell that? I have a hard time doing things like that. So the bones are easily removed as the work progresses. This process shows threads on the reverse side, as in other embroideries, and makes an even weightier spread. Both types belong to the first quarter of the 19th century and usually are initialed and dated. There is no history to the handmade example, which we're going to look at, but hearts forming the loops on the large swag border and the heart units forming the rosettes proclaim this is a bride's spread. It is signed and dated Martha Freeman, 1823. And so this is it. And it is beautiful. And it's a little bit different. I mean, this is obviously like hand done, and these spreads that my grandmothers had, in the 60s, 70s, whenever. I mean, I just always remember them, and I don't know when they got them. I want to say we're sort of born of, a colonial revival kind of stuff, like, we had going on moving into the bicentennial. So I think I mentioned, I know my one grandmother, there was definitely an eagle in the middle of it. So I'm thinking it was probably early 70s that they got them. And they're just more dense than this. But they're obviously, the ones from the 70s were definitely factory made. So how long did it take to make? A question heard so often. In two shield-shaped reserves, Jane Voorhees gave an answer to possible wonderment over her masterpiece. Her name and the dates, 1830 to 1831. The inference is that Jane was as industrious as she was gifted and made her spread in 1 year. It looks like the labor of a lifetime. And so this is another one. Oh. Oh, you guys, look at this. It's not the most superb picture, but, you know, I mean, that's because of the color of the quilt. But look at that. I mean, that is just dense work. Gorgeous. Corded quilts of this kind were made in England and Wales in the 17th century, though the technique is older even than that. And I want to say, I mean, she really talked about, well, corded quilts, we know that Avril Colby talked about that a lot and sort of, you know, in the UK and, you know, throughout the colonies, how, you know, they were using corded and stuffed work. And so the cording, you know, I mean, it's something that I did not research, and I have not researched in detail, but when Avril Colby talked about the cording, I mean, it was the quilted armor and those kind of things. There was sometimes cording involved. I do know, you know, as we go through the centuries, there's women's support garments that are corded, but we do know that boutie, which is a type of cording that came out of Provence in France, is a very specific type of corded quilting. And then we have the trapunto, which is the stuffed quilting. And so there's, you know, there's all of these different techniques. And I guess they kind of all just kind of converge here in the US. And I mean, I guess that's just an example of what, you know, what is happening in these. Now, she says, and again, let me show you again. Yowza, right? Her caption here says, a corded spread is a rare item in America. Okay. The two dates, 1830, 1831, suggest that the industrious needlewoman accomplished her amazing task in 1 year. So, I mean, she had to have been working on it constantly, I'm guessing. I don't know. So, yeah, and I guess you kind of wonder if, you know, all that kind of converging here in the U.S., but it's considered rare here. Kind of wonder where did she learn this? We might find out if I keep reading. So corded quilts of this kind were made in England and Wales in the 17th century, though the technique is older even than that. This spread is in 2 layers, a fine cambric for the face and a coarser weave for the backing. And I mean, we kind of always hear that. Even the most fine quilt will often have a shabbier backing. And not shabby. You know, it's just not as fine as the front. You know, because you're not going to see the back. Although sometimes the backing is incredible and it's something you never would expect. Running stitches 1/4 of an inch apart form channels through which candle wicking has been run with a bodkin or tapestry needle, extending in parallel lines from the central medallion to the petal border. The roving is snipped off on the wrong side wherever it meets the main design. This ribbing makes a background for the padded floral motifs. Padding or stuffing was done by working from the back, separating the threads of the backing material with a bone stiletto, and introducing small bits of cotton through the opening thus made. The process is repeated until each flower, leaf, and stem stands out in high relief from the corded background. I mean, wow, such work. And I know Jill showed us a quilt last week that she has that had a little bit of damage, so you could kind of see that stuffing coming out and what that looked like. And you know, as I'm looking here, it's really hard to tell, but that background definitely has a ribbed look in this quilt. Let me see if there's any way my camera can pick it up. I don't think so. It's kind of down here on the bottom. But yeah, so everything in between those big stuffed pieces is corded. So wow, this thing must have been heavy. This spread formerly was in the collection of Mrs. J. Amory Haskell Jr., and much of her famous Americana came from Long Island and New Jersey. The Voorhees ancestry is happily known, and the first colonial ancestor of that name came over in the Spotted Cow. I'm guessing the Spotted Cow was a ship. and settled in Flatlands, Long Island. And we know there's lots of Dutch people that settled Long Island. And obviously the name Voorhees would be Dutch. Jane probably was sister or cousin of Stephen Voorhees, who married Joanna Bergen in Flatlands in 1825. And then about 1975, there was Michael Voorhees, who put on a mask and killed people. No, Jason Voorhees. Jason Voorhees. Sorry. I ruined my own joke. And I'm trying to think, where did that movie take place? I can't remember if that one was in New York as well. Contemporary with the Jane Voorhees spread is one of the valued all-white, all-quilted type made near New Hope, Pennsylvania. So let's look at that one. Oh, you guys, look at this. I mean, can you even? I mean, this is the kind of thing that even today, like factory made, would still be amazing. And so the caption here says, all quilted white spread. The patrician elegance, she sure loves to use that. The patrician elegance of the quilt is accentuated in this detail by the close quilting, which forms a textured background, throwing the main design into sharp relief. Wow. You want to do that when you grow up. White spreads were not limited to specific localities, but have had their origins in New England, New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and many states of the Southland. So yeah, lots of places there were white quilts. Always made to serve as a counterpane, the interlining was spread thin to allow for the finest and most elaborate decoration. None but experienced quilters undertook the exacting task, though mistresses of the art, who had served an apprenticeship on simpler work, vied with each other to produce a white masterpiece. On the New Hope spread, spaces between the central medallion and the field, and again just inside the outer border, are so closely quilted in convoluted lines that a stippled effect mats the exotic fruit and flower design. No known history of this example survives. Yeah, so the the quilting on this. I mean, again, look at that. Like, that sort of darker area, that's all quilting. I mean, it's so tiny and like close together. Wow. From Charleston, South Carolina comes the Tree of Life. It is signed and dated Sarah F.C.H. Miller, 1830. Now this one, I think she has in color. Let's see if I can find it. No, let's play 3. Well, you know, the one thing that I have an issue with Florence's book is that the plates don't have numbers, page numbers. So you kind of have to flip through the book to find it. Here we go. So this is the Tree of Life. Let's see. This South Carolina spread is nearly 4 yards wide and was planned for an extremely high 4-post bed. The applique tree is built up of motifs cut from a glazed English chintz. Borders of chintz enclosed applied cut-out floral sprays and butterflies. So look at this gorgeous thing. And I'm so glad she included this one in color, because I feel like if we looked at it in black and white, we would never know how stunning it is. But I mean, look at those birds and all that floral stuff in the middle. You know, to just have like access to these beautiful pieces of chintz and then to cut them up. I'm not a chintz person, but I have really gained an admiration for the work that not only the makers of chintz fabric, the printing, but you know what these quilters did with it. Uh-oh. Did I lose my place? mahogany. All right, here we go. Okay, so it's signed and dated. Sarah Miller, 1830. Chintz printed with lush foliage and vibrant with a garden's wealth of full-blown beauty went into the making. Women near the coastal towns, north or south, had access at this time to fine decorated cotton fabrics, which America was not yet manufacturing. Sis Sally, as she was known to her intimates, was a sister of Dr. Miller. So that's interesting. Her name is Sarah, but she's known as Sis Sally. She was sister of Dr. Miller, who was minister of the First Presbyterian Church in Charleston. Unmarried, she made her home with her brother and worked out a variation of the Tree of Life for the bed in the guest room of the manse. The manse. This spread is 4 yards wide. That's big. That's like, what 4 yards is? That's 12 feet, right? That's enormous. 4 yards wide, and it covered a four-poster so high that there were mahogany steps that enabled overnight guests to climb into the towering roost. From a foliage base, the tree is built up of branches bearing luxurious flowers. Peacocks teeter precariously on insubstantial perches, but nothing can happen on an old-time, but anything can happen on an old-time quilt design. So yes, peacocks can stand on a flower stem. There are scattered applied bouquets, bird groups, and hovering butterflies, the whole bordered with a rose and blue glazed chintz. Superb half-inch diamond quilting textures a background creamed with age. So half-inch diamond quilting. I mean, we're talking wee, tiny. An uncommon, indeed rare, type of bed cover displays decoration done by stencil. The few examples which have been discovered have vague or incomplete histories, but appear to have had their origins in New York State and in Vermont. All show floral and more or less related designs. So let's see what this is all about. Oh, okay. So this is a stenciled counterpane. And then there's the detail. So this is very pretty. And it says, in 2 layers and with no quilting, this rare type of bed cover shows charming floral designs on a background of cambric. So the pictured spread has been made in 2 layers and it has not been quilted. The decoration is a repeat of formal flower clusters in red, green, and orange yellow on a background of age-mellowed cambric. The date is circa 1830. A spread of the same type, which is in the collection of the New York Historical Society, shows the entire surface covered with stylized 5-petal blooms entwined with a meandering vine of ivy leaves. This example has been interlined, and quilting follows the curves of the pattern. So I wonder if the New York Historical Society still has that quilt. Colors are pastel blues, rose, yellow, and green. The petals, deep blue at the edges, fade gradually to pale blue at their bases. Shaded portions on this particular stenciled spread achieve the free effect of hand painting. The technique has charm, but the irregularities which appear in each of the 2 specimens would seem to indicate amateur or homestead work. So what she's saying is it's not that good. A professional would have gauged his pattern better to fit allotted spaces, and by doing so, he would have lost something of the spread's naive appeal. Now, I'm looking at this, and I don't see... I mean, I guess, yeah, you can kind of see that sort of the spacing's a little bit wonky. But, I mean, come on, Florence. I mean, it looks like sort of the columns here maybe don't line up perfectly. And I think this top row is closer to the middle than the bottom row is. But, I mean, come on, Florence. Give them some credit. Illustrative of the type of applique quilt made for or by brides in and around the city of Baltimore is shown next. We'll look at that. Encircled by the cherry wreath is a quilted heart and the date 1833. And so this is called a Baltimore bride's quilt. A bride's quilt was the finest one in a dower, and its squares of diverse patterns were usually made by close friends of the bride-to-be. This example is one of the earliest of its type. So I would call this sort of a precursor to the Baltimore album quilts. So this is an album quilt. It was definitely an album quilt. But they're calling these bride quilts because the action in the blocks is just a little bit different. And I'm not enough of a scholar of Baltimore album quilts to really like sort of point out what all of those differences are. But yeah, I would say that these album quilts that, you know, we see like, you know, all over the place at this time and you know, all the way through the 1800s. There are the ones that are Baltimore album, and then there are ones that are just albums or bride quilts. So, and also notice, let's see, it's this one right here. This block, if you can see it, that particular block is Florence uses that block. Let me find it. Am I going to be able to find it? You know what? It's probably not in this book. Bear with me. Too many books and book jackets. Do you see on Florence's little lecture card? That's that block. Florence is very tricky. She, you know, she was, I would not have called her an illustrator, but I think she had she had drawing skills. She had drafting skills. And so I think she often would sort of redraft these, you know, these quilt patterns or quilt blocks and reuse them, you know. So there it is. It's kind of fun when you see these things and you're like, oh, I know where that is. I know what that looks like. Okay, so this quilt is early for its type, and I wonder if she's kind of hinting at Baltimore albums. A few years later, it would become the vogue for each friend of a prospective bride to make a patchwork square and sign it. These would be assembled into a quilt and very likely quilted at a community quilting party. If the house was large enough, more than one quilt was put into the frames, and the quilting went on all day. When one woman tired, there was always another to take her place. It was a social asset to be a good quilter, and the penalty for not being one was no invitations. Flo is a perjuring art thief. I don't know if I would say that. Two elderly sisters who lived in a rural New York community in the 1850s were expert needlewomen and made many quilts. I think she's probably told this story before in her other book. Maybe. Socially inclined, they invited the neighbors to quilting parties, but after each session, they scrutinized the work with eagle eyes. It is related of them that one time, dissatisfied beyond bearing, they closed the blinds and locked the doors and made believe they were not home, so no caller would have her feelings hurt. Out came all the quilting that 8 women had spent a day happily stitching, and together the sisters did the work all over again. Oh my gosh. You may not come. We're going to turn off the lights and lock the doors and take out all of your quilting. Oh my gosh, that cracks me up so much. The Baltimore Bride's quilt is the work of one needlewoman, for sewing, like penmanship, reveals peculiarities, and the stitching on this example is too uniform ever to have been done by many hands. Many times quilts were put in and taken out of the frames in one quilting party, but the best quilts were not whisked to perfection with any such expedition. A white ribbon, third prize, was awarded this spread at the same exhibition where the bride's quilt, which we looked at earlier, there's that one. Oh, it makes me crazy how they spread these things out. So this one that we looked at on Monday. Remember this one's got the funky corner. Uh-oh, I lost my spot again. Where'd it go? One day you guys are going to be like, Stephanie, we can't listen to you read anymore because you lose your place so often. We don't know what you're doing. Oh, crud. Where did I leave this off? All right, there's Jane Voorhees. Okay, here's the two elderly women. Okay, so the bride's quilt with the funky corner took the blue ribbon. In several of the lovely floral blocks, and you know what, before I go on, to say, you know, she doesn't say where. It just says at the same exhibition. Now, this is just speculation on my part because I think there was lots and lots of places to exhibit quilts in the 1800s and even in the 20th century. You know, you've got fairs and, you know, like the county fair, those kind of things. But in Baltimore, the Maryland Institute College of Art used to be called the Maryland Institute. And I do know, at least in the late 1800s, but I want to say for a significant part of the 1800s, they would have these big exhibitions. And there were all of these different categories that you could enter. And there were, I mean, and it was everything from like, you know, are you really good at making farm machinery or something? You know, bring in the plow that you made, you know, all the way to, you know, women's work. And so you could, you know, a quilt, an Afghan, needlepoint, like all kinds of things. And it was more of like a technology and skills exhibition than it was, you know, like they didn't have the livestock part of it. So that's how it was different than, say, like a county fair. But I mean, hundreds of these things. I've looked it up. There's, I think in some cases, I mean, there's literally like books printed that list all the stuff for these exhibitions, but you can find them in the newspaper, definitely. And it's just some of the ones I've looked at are just pages and pages of like just a person's name, what it was that they submitted, and whether it won a prize or not. And so they would win ribbons, but then these, you know, first, second, third, these places would also get them a prize. And sometimes the prize would be money, but more often it was some kind of thing of value. So it might be something like a silver spoon or a silver cup, or some sort of, you know, carved bone thing or a mother of pearl thing. It was really interesting the way that, you know, they would list these things, and it was almost like random. It was like, you know, for the needlepoint category, we're giving away a silver fork, you know, and I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but it literally was things like silver plated flatware and stuff that they were giving away as prizes. Interesting. In several of the lovely floral blocks may be noticed the intentional divergence of color that was evidenced in the Star of Bethlehem that we looked at. Here, in less copious manner, blue leaves occasionally are substituted for green ones, upsetting a balanced color scheme through the small sacrifice of absolute perfection may have thwarted an evil spirit. Now, okay, we don't have color here in this particular, the Star of Bethlehem that she's talking about. And she says, blue leaves. But here's the thing. What we know about the dyes is that to get green, and I mean, again, this is where I really struggle with my fabric dyeing and dating. But I do know that, getting the color fast green was a challenge. And it was the synthetic greens, like Shields green, the one that killed everyone. Those synthetic greens took a while. And so, we know from art school or art class, even in elementary school, that yellow and blue make green. So I challenge the idea that these were blue leaves substituted for green ones on purpose. I say that these were blue leaves that used to be green. Just saying. I could be totally wrong. I could be very wrong. But that's, to me, like when you see that, blue or yellow where it should be green, it's not that, to me, it's, my guess is not that the maker made that decision, but rather you had a fabric that, for whatever reason, lost either the blue or the yellow that had made the green. So Granges and farm beers in upstate New York. Yeah. I mean, even though we've got big cities, I mean, Baltimore town was a big city, but, anything like around the periphery of a city, we take it for granted. It's a suburb today, but back then it would have been country. And so, yeah, I mean, I know in Maryland, definitely the state fair is not that old. I mean, the state fair might be, I don't know, started sometime in the early 20th century, but the smaller local fairs, the farm and county fairs, definitely, there's lots of them. There were lots of them. So she's thinking that these blue leaves are maybe an attempt at thwarting an evil spirit, but I don't think so. I think she's wrong. If there are chuckles at these old-time superstitions, be sure to chuckle the next time wood is knocked while bragging of good health, or when fingers are crossed when telling of the good behavior of Junior. She's such a smart aleck. Devotees of piecework will appreciate the dexterity displayed in assembling both the mariner's compass. And this is one we haven't looked at. This one's in color as well. And the pin cushion. Let's look at that in a minute. So this is the mariner's compass. It says long, slender patches and the sharp points of a mariner's compass were postgraduate work. Mathematical precision and well-chosen colors make this example a fine work of art. I have to tell you, I have done a very basic mariner's compass. I literally paper pieced it. I English paper pieced it because I couldn't figure out. And mine was nowhere near this complex. But this is some really skilled work here. I could not even tell you how those blocks are put together. So in the pin cushion plate, let's see, 15A. The pin cushion. Let's see what that is. Oh. I did not know that that's what this was called. Okay. So this is what she's calling a pin cushion. It looks a lot, and I know it's not, but it looks a lot like a cathedral windows sort of thing. But I think it's just these, like, they're just orange peels that are pieced around these colored bits in the middle. And it says, details showing the painstaking piecework and gaily flowered, highly glazed chintz, which combine to make a sparkling bedspread. It is lined with home-dyed butternut muslin. Butternut muslin. All right. Okay. All geometric piecing demanded neatness, with even and well-defined points and angles. Right. And good luck with that. Because I feel like, what does she say, that graduate level work? Yeah. To ensure accuracy, small patches that went into the making of mosaics or any pattern with long, slender points were basted to a paper lining. Okay, so I did it right. A narrow margin was folded over the paper, and then, with two edges held together, the seam was whipped with tiny over and over stitches. Yeah, so she's basically describing English paper piecing. 9 circular compass units have been set into properly shaped muslin pieces to make the Mariner's Compass quilt top. Red and green hickory leaf motifs are appliqued to intermediate spaces. Okay, so that's why we can't tell where the blocks are, because there's applique over. Yeah, so I'm guessing somewhere here those pieces in the middle are appliqued, so they probably cover up some seams, but still, well, it strikes me as difficult. That's a difficult one to figure out. On the quilt, the dramatic pattern is toned down by soft colors, browns, blues, and yellow. A red and blue Persian pear print borders the edge. It is credited to Central New Jersey circa 1835. When seaming was done with curved lines, it took infinite patience, for puckers keep a quilt top from lying flat. You want to talk about puckers? This quilt here does not lie flat because it is quilted in a concentric spiral, and this is the start of the spiral, and you can see dark but glowing calicos, ginghams, and chintzes form the pincushions, whose concave and convex curves fit into each other with snug precision. A wild goose chase border offers angles as contrast and is set between 2 other borders of glazed chintz sprinkled with pink roses on a royal blue ground. Butternut dyed muslin is an interesting backing, and the quilting outlines the piecing. The pincushion was made by a member of the Vanderbilt family in Rockland County, New York in 1835. Related in no way to economical necessity, there existed a strange urge among some needlewomen to piece a quilt employing hundreds, even thousands of patches. It seemed competitive, for newspapers proudly announced local champions. And absolutely, I've seen this in old newspapers. Dr. Dutton himself had a couple of clippings, and I think that Florence is going to talk about one of them. But yeah, you would have these sort of like grandmother's flower garden type of, hexagon stuff, or you'd have, the like the Matterhorn, those kind of pixelated looking quilts, or you'd have you'd have like tumbling blocks, like a very small tumbling blocks, and there's a lot of pieces in there, and so people would be like, oh, my quilt has 8,000 pieces. Oh yeah, well mine has 10,000. Often the results seemed not to warrant the labor, but sparkling mosaics of hexagons, triangles, and half-inch squares exist to testify that beauty can be wrought by the use of many small patches. Less than 1-inch squares, red and white, have been cut diagonally and seamed, reversing the colors to make the sawtooth blocks in the white cross. Let's look at that. Let's see, 15. So that is this. Below the pincushion. And so, I'm really pushing it here, but those are little half-inch, these little borders around the crosses are like little half-inch, half-square triangles. The superior quilting, following the outlines of the piecing, shows up more effectively on the reverse side. The white cross very well may have suffered the fate of other beautifully quilted examples when their owners, prompted by the vogue for white counterpanes, used them face down, the better to display the quilting. This very lively quilt hails from upstate New York, circa 1835 to 40. JV, I don't know, I feel like she means the butternut. The butternut is the color. So I don't know that butternuts were used for dyeing, but maybe it is the butternut. Who knows? They are tasty. They are very tasty. I do love a butternut squash. Oh, it's a nut from a tree. Okay. I did not know this. I only knew a butternut's a squash. Interesting. I have learned something today. Okay, you lived in Butternut Valley? Okay, I'm going to have to look this up. I've never heard of them. I know we have, our specialty crop is the pawpaw. I wonder if butternuts are like that. They're, I don't know. I'm going to look this up after we're done here today. So, So I think this is interesting. She's talking about, women are flipping their, a color specifically. Yep. Oh, uniforms of butternut. Interesting. Okay. Very tough shell, looks like a long skinny walnut. Well, so then I'm really wondering, like, what is, when she's, because I'm thinking butternut dyed muslin. She's hyphenating butternut hyphen dyed. I'm just thinking it's the color, but a thing that is a nut that I'm assuming has a shell that's maybe walnut like would definitely be a thing that could, I would think, be used for dyeing. Here's a thing for us to research and find out more about. The princess feather. Let's look at that one. We know what princess feather looks like. Very pretty. Unfortunately, this one was kind of gathered together a little bit. So you got this big fold in the middle. But that's a really beautiful princess feather. And I'm guessing it must be, let's see. The bold design and workmanship on this quilt were influential in its awards of 3 New Jersey state prizes. But I'm guessing the princess feathers themselves look like they must have been cut from some type of pattern fabric, because they look like, they're not solid. And, I by no means am I an expert in looking at princess feathers, but I feel like all the ones I've ever looked at are, red and green or, solid color. Ooh, butternut dye. Okay. The shell and an outer cover definitely stain things. Okay. Fascinating. And so then I'm wondering if butternut squash is called that because it's the same color. Isn't it amazing the stuff that you learn about just by reading this stuff? I mean, it's really funny. Let's see. It was awarded 3 New Jersey state prizes. A bold disposition of 6 appliqued 4-branch feather units separates 16-pieced sunbursts, which are set into a white muslin background. Noteworthy is the introduction of extra single plumes, which extend inward from an undulate floral border. An undulate. They happily fill what might have been awkward white spaces. The bugaboo of the quilt planner. Awkward white spaces. So yeah. I mean, I see that these just, it is a really good design how she's done this. I mean, you see that they're the single plumes. And there would have been that weird space left because of the way these are set. Good design. Red calico patterned with blue flowers predominates in feathers and border. Okay, so it is a calico. Green, yellow, and blue prints appear in the sunbursts. So this was a very colorful quilt. Yeah, I'd like to see it in color. The spread was made by Mrs. Catherine Ann Fitzgerald and her sisters. Mrs. Fitzgerald's husband, Joshua, was in business in Newark from 1838 to 1856, and the quilt was made during this time. The princess feather, a heritage design from England in Northumberland and Durham, it was a pattern that descended from mother to daughter for hundreds of years. Interesting. Enjoys almost unrivaled popularity when used as a quilting motif due to its adaptability and grace. As a wreath, it adorns squares, and as a vine, it conforms flexibly to border requirements. That is very interesting. And so, of course, she's calling it a princess feather. So, like, female, princess. There's also something called prince's feather, which I think sometimes the terminology may be used interchangeably. But the design of the princess, not princess, but princess, like, I feel like I can't articulate this clearly enough, but prince apostrophe s, meaning ownership of a prince. That sort of like design is attributed to Prince Albert, in that in the Victorian period. So this is later than what we're talking about here. And I'm not talking about quilts. I'm talking about Prince apostrophe s as feather. If you've ever seen hair work in the Victorian era, you'll see those little like curled plumes of hair. And that is called Prince's feather design of the hair work. And I think that there were other things around then that, you know, were kind of, you know, these floofy sort of flowery, feathery looking things that were called princes. So apostrophe s, you know, to not a tribute, but like, I guess, relevant to Prince Albert. And so I'm wondering, and again, huge guess on my part, that this princess feather design maybe informed or was kind of, I don't know, I mean, like, I guess kind of taken the idea and then ran with it to Prince Albert. I don't know. I mean, they may have nothing to do with each other. But it's just interesting that, you know, this princess feather, obviously, you know, she's saying it's much older than, you know, Queen Victoria's reign. Or, well, I'm trying to think. Queen Victoria, she was a very long time ruler. So I don't know, the dates may overlap here with this princess feather. But, I mean, she's saying it's a heritage design from England that had been used for a very long time, hundreds of years. So, another thing to look at and, and research. Okay, so the great favorite, the garden basket, provided scope for creative pleasure. Though the basic pieced section varied little, the baskets overflowed with flowers, oranges, cherries, and grapes, while birds lit on the handles and butterflies fluttered near. Let's look at that one. So this is the garden basket she's talking about. It's very pretty, very ornate. You know, it's, oh, and look at that detail, the quilting detail. And so that is what is in between the flower or the baskets there. Nine baskets pieced of red and green triangles form blocks set diagonally with alternate white squares, the whole surrounded with a serpentine flower and bud border. Unique is the decoration done entirely in wool embroidery. Many Pennsylvania Dutch applique quilts showed wool decoration, but it was done with heavier yarn and much heavier hand. Princess feather wreaths comprise the quilting around the baskets. The quilted cable pattern border follows a scalloped edge, which is finished with buttonholing, another unique feature. This garden basket was made in the Finger Lakes section of New York State circa 1840. So I'm trying to see, it says rare if not unique is the delicate crewel embroidery of flowers, leaves, and meandering vines that fill the pieced baskets and form the border of the quilt. So, I mean, it looks like applique to me, but I'm guessing some or all of this might be crewel embroidery. And I just feel like, you know, I mean, not that I've done much needlepoint, but, you know, working with crewel, I mean, if you're working on like a cotton that's more densely woven than, say, like a linen kind of needlepoint background. I can imagine that pulling those threads through might be kind of difficult. And I think that might be the end of this chapter. It is. That's the end of the chapter. So this book is truly difficult to flip back and forth through. So chapter 3 is 1840 to 1948. And we might be able to read that on Monday. We'll have to see. We might have to sort of skip the book for a week or so, depending on, what's going on. The eclipse. Okay, so I think we have just enough time. I wanted to show you this video. And we'll look at fiber arts another time. But let's see. Let me do my other screen. And then, because a dear friend of the show sent, yeah, of course, can I find it? Here we go. Nope. Oh, it was here all along. A dear friend of the show sent me this video, and, real quick, social currency. I know Mary used to always talk about this on Quilt Nerd, but I will do commentary on this, for copyright issues. But definitely, follow and like this video. It seems to me that this might have been like a student project or something, because just looking at the channel, let's see. Sorry guys. Let me grab a link for this. But yeah, it looks like the girl who owns the channel has not done a whole lot with it. So I don't know if, this was just for a short period of time that she did this, but I think the video is very good. So, wanted to share it. And like I said, even if you don't necessarily follow her channel because she doesn't have a whole lot on there, definitely like the video. And please share the video because it's a really good one. So this is called It Takes a Quilt. It's a 20-minute documentary, so we'll go over a little bit over 2 hours today. But this is about Raleigh quilts, which are made in a certain region of India/Pakistan. And you have certainly seen them. If you've done any kind of just looking out there for quilts, especially if you're interested in, other, quilting outside of the United States, you certainly have run across these. There's Raleigh, there's Kantha, there's a bunch of different types of quilting traditions in India and Pakistan. So anyway, this is about the Raleigh quilts. It's a really interesting story. And the woman, and oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on her name. We're going to learn it in a minute. She wrote the really great book called Raleigh Quilts. And it had been on my list forever. And, sometimes you put something on your wish list and then you just forget about it. And so I kind of had forgotten, even though it had been recommended to me. So anyway, I have ordered it through Abe. I hate to say this. I try to order from the authors whenever possible, but it's only $6 on Abe. So I ordered the book. And so I highly recommend it. And let's look at this. So scoot this over so you can actually see. I will turn the volume up when we get to the part where they're talking, because right now it's just music and it's kind of loud at the beginning. But I'm not exactly sure what, they're twining something there, and I don't know what that was. But look at these, and she's gonna actually talk, about these. And show the women. The garments too, and I suspect on those women, those white things with the blue, I think that's like the eagle eye kind of. that fringe. She's gonna explain these quilts. And yes, that's reverse applique. Okay.
Many women in the villages throughout
Oops.
and India spend their days making Raleigh quilts, a tradition and skill that started hundreds of years ago.
Most quilts are made for every day, and people sleep on them. So they have like a cot with short legs, about 1.5 feet tall, and a rectangular cot with webbing. And so they usually have quilts that they'll put on the cot, almost like a mattress, so you don't get the rope webbing. And then they pull more quilts over them. And so those everyday quilts are usually a little bit more simple. They
Is the volume okay, you guys? I want to make sure, like, I don't want to blast your ears. But I just want to make sure that it's not too loud, but you can hear it. So let me know if I need to turn it up.
They'll use a lot of times geometric square blocks sewn together in different patterns. So that's most of the quilts they make. But then they also make special wedding quilts. And these things will maybe take a year or two to make. They will do applique shapes, which are like they're like what we would make with paper snowflakes. So you take a piece of fabric, you fold it up into quarters or eighths, and then you snip out of it, and then you open it up, and you have a pattern. And they do that often, and especially for these fancier quilts, like a wedding quilt, the dowry quilt. And then with those quilts, they also add a lot of bling. And so they love to have mirrors and sequins and fringe on the edge and little pom-poms and little embroidery. I mean, they really bling them out, and they're really beautiful. So they have those. And then they also have, oftentimes they have special gift quilts. And these quilts, for example, they have holy men that will travel village to village and come and visit families and leave blessings with the families. And they have both Hindu and Muslim out of that group. And they oftentimes will have a special quilt that this person will sit on or use while they're there. So that's another special kind of quilt.
Tricia Stoddard first discovered these brightly colored hand-stitched quilts when her husband got stationed in Pakistan with the U.S. Embassy in 19...
So Patricia Stoddard is her name. So if you're interested to look up the book, and I think, like I said, I think it's called Raleigh Quilts. So, yeah, Patricia Stoddard. I think it's Stoddard.
1996. She wanted something to cover the bare white walls in her government-issued house, and loved the bright colors and patterns she saw in the market.
I didn't even know there were such things when I got there. So it's kind of a funny story. When we arrived in Pakistan, there was they gave us instructions when we left the U.S. and they said, bring things that represent America, because when people come to visit your home, that way they'll learn about America and the kind of things we like and that sort of thing. So that was great.
And I think that is interesting, you guys, because, I mean, think about it. Like, I've never lived abroad. I've only traveled a little bit. But, I mean, you think, like, if I was going to live abroad, I feel like, yes, I would bring my things, like, you know, if I was in a home that I'd be there for a while, I'd bring my things. But I'd also want to decorate kind of with the local flair, which you're going to find out what she did. But I think it's so interesting. The State Department's like, bring American things so you can show off American things. That's interesting.
So we collected, photos and paintings and things to put on the wall and decorations that were American, and we had them sent over, and they arrived there in the country, but I don't know if it was the customs people or the Foreign Service or somebody was holding them until they were ready to give them to us. And so we went for like 3 weeks, and we still didn't have our things, and I'm just sitting in the house was owned by the embassy, and so it was just big white walls and waiting for decorations. And so I was sitting around, and I thought, this is really driving me crazy, all these white walls. And so I I knew that in Pakistan there's lots of textile work. And so I said, I'm just going to go and find something big and bold and colorful, and I'm going to put it on this wall until we can get some, our own things to hang up. And so I went to this handicraft shop, and the way they do it there is they...
Wait till you hear this part. I'm like, I would be in heaven.
If you're going for textiles or traditional things, there's just kind of big stacks and piles and lots of variety. There's embroidery, there's printing, block printing, there's weaving, So I just sat on a chair and I was going through all these stacks of things because I didn't really have an idea of what I was looking for other than I just wanted something colorful and big. And so I spent a couple hours and I got to the bottom of the pile, and here was the quilt. And it was this first one I saw reminded me of the Amish quilts.
And so, yes, she says it reminds her of the Amish quilts. Absolutely. But also I'm like, well, this is a trip around the world. the maker has made a quilt that is a trip around the world quilt. And then the border looks to me like an applique. That little zigzaggy is an applique. But, I mean, this is one of those things. This is proof to me that we as human beings develop things independent of each other. Now, could this maker have had, some reference to a trip around the world quilt? Sure, perhaps, but I suspect not, based on what she's going to say in a little bit about these little villages where these women are making quilts. This was most likely designed and developed without any kind of other cultural reference outside of Pakistan. So keep that in mind.
And so that was the first time I ever realized I had a quilt there. So, finding a quilt, it seems so very familiar because, it's just like any of us would say, you see bedding that's sewed together like that in layers, you say that's a quilt. And so it was really, it felt familiar, but then it was also unique in the way the coloring was. And so I bought it, and it was very inexpensive. And so I went home happy. I thought, oh, I've got this big thing. I can hang it on the wall. It's colorful. And then I kept looking at it all week, and
And by the way, she never says what very inexpensive means, but I suspect it was, truly very, very inexpensive. And this is, I think she said, this is like 1990. So this is, this is some time ago. I can't even imagine. I'm just thinking she probably could pick up all of these textiles for, a song.
Examining it and enjoying it. And the next week we still didn't have our things to hang up, and so I went to the next handicraft shop, and basically the same thing happened. I went through a big pile of things, and at the bottom was this quilt.
Stoddard liked the quilt so much that she went back to the market again and again. But soon she got beyond the visual appeal of the quilts and became curious about their origin. A former college professor at Brigham Young University, Stoddard began using her research skills to learn the history of quilting in Pakistan and India. After several years of visiting villages and talking to the quilt makers, Stoddard had enough material to write a book called Raleigh Quilts, Traditional Textiles from Pakistan and India.
One of my purposes in writing the book was, number one, I was really, loved the craft that I found. But I realized it hadn't been documented. And so I could see it changing a little bit, even 20 years ago when I first found these saw them, and I was afraid that this tradition might.
I just have to stop here and say these are the ones that I love so much, and a lot of it is the iconography or the symbols, the pictures here are really interesting, stylized, floral and birds, but the colors, you guys, I cannot pass by anything that is, fluorescent orange, fluorescent pink. I just died and gone to heaven if I could decorate my whole house like this.
just disappear without anybody even realizing it had been, you know. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to find quilts and find examples of different patterns and photograph them and get them out there so people could appreciate them. And
Courthouse steps.
so that was really one of my purposes, is to not let it change and go away before people had a chance to love it.
She says she gained a great appreciation for the women she met and worked with in the villages, especially Permaben, who broke from making the traditional patterns.
One of the stories that stands out to me is a story of it's a Hindu woman, and she was a quilter, and in these parts of Pakistan and India where the women make quilts, this is how everyone, the kind of bedding everyone uses on their beds. And so everyone quilts to some extent, or if they have someone in their family, they will get them to, quilt in exchange for something else, So everyone.
So as we've read through some of these, historical United States quilting, at one time everybody sewed, right? And it was just part of the women's job to make, sheets and quilts and clothing and all that stuff. And so in rural areas of Pakistan and India, you still have that because, it's rural. They don't necessarily have the, the advanced cultural stuff that we do. And they're still doing things the way we might have done them 100, 200 years ago.
Uses these kind of things. And so this one woman that I visited with, she followed the tradition. She learned as a child how to quilt. She made quilts out of square blocks and different designs, like, making a diamond or something with her square blocks. And then she's in her early 70s now, but about 1985, she just decided to do her own thing. And so she made these really fabulous quilts. She used bright colors, and she made lines, and she made all these different designs. And she was saying that her neighbors laughed at her because she broke traditions so boldly. and so
the quilt police are also alive and well in Pakistan.
But she had kept quilting for the next 30 plus years with her own bold designs, and just kind of keeping it quiet from the neighbors, kind of quilting inside or when the neighbors were gone or something. And so when she was showing it to, it was a friend and I, it was, at first she was her head was kind of down. She didn't know how we would take it because she already knew her neighbors laughed at her with them. And we thought they were fabulous, it's modern art. It was her creative spirit was just pouring out all over these quilts. And so that's one of the stories I remember the best.
And do those not resemble some G's Ben stuff we might have looked at before?
Yes, and it's so endearing to me that this woman, illiterate woman, lived in the village, had this natural creativity that just was amazing.
Now Stoddard not only loves the quilts, she loves the women who make them, because she better understands what their lives are like and the time and skill it takes to make these intricate patterns.
I love the women there. I think the women in the village are such an integral part of the village, both economically and socially, that they do feel a sense of importance. Occasionally, when I've been to villages, the women will initially hide their face or something like that, but that's mostly tradition. But then when they speak, most of the time they speak with a sense of who they are, where they fit in their community. They seem to know that. And they realize that their work is important for their family. So they're proud of what they do, and they just their sense of self is very strong, which is, I think, a different perception than a lot of people might have when you think of economically poorer people. And but they know their work is important, and the family wouldn't function without them. They're very strong, and and oftentimes they're very curious, as especially I usually travel with another woman when we do our textile research. And I remember one village, this was in Pakistan, the woman, she was really curious, you know, she just got kind of looking at us, and she said, "Where are you from?" And we said, "Well, we're from America." And she said, "What's that?" I mean, she was, you know, she was trying to figure us out, you know, like where we came from, you know, did we drop off the moon or something? But no, it's, she wasn't afraid to ask. You know, she was trying to place us in her, you know, in her universe. Where did we, where did we fit in? And so that was kind of an interesting perception, and, you know, taught us something about how people see us.
And I suspect things may not be like that now. But I mean, what she's describing is she's going to a village where, you know, I mean, I think this, what I do know about that area of Pakistan and India is that it is very, I mean, it's rural, but it's also, you know, deserty, mountainy kind of, you know, high desert kind of conditions. And so, you know, you've got people that may be like cut off from others, I guess. And, you know, I mean, like we think about Gee's Bend, you know, that was geographically, they were kind of cut off. And I think that it's this way, you know, in a lot of places where, you know, rural villages, there's, you know, it's poverty, it's sort of subsistence living. And so it's interesting to think about that, you know, folks that are illiterate, you know, in some of these villages, there might only be a few people that are, you know, literate of their, you know, language and writing of their country. And, you know, they simply don't have pop culture references. They don't have, you know, the internet. They probably don't have books and newspapers readily available. And so it's probably no surprise that a person could live for, you know, their whole life and really not quite understand what is outside of their village. Now, I think today I would have a hard time believing, unless we're talking about like, you know, some kind of like really secluded mountaintop kind of village, where they would not have heard of the United States or, you know that there were things outside. And I kind of wonder, like, exactly how did this woman say, like, America, what's that? But, you know, I mean, it does make sense to me. If a person who doesn't read and, you know, does not have access to, you know, again, pop culture, you know, connected world kind of stuff, you know, they're creating in a vacuum. And I think that's what's so amazing about these quilts, that, again, like I said, you know, do they look like Gee's Bend quilts? Yes. Do they look like, you know, our standard, you know, 18th, 19th, and 20th century designs? Yeah. Courthouse steps, bow ties. I mean, all this stuff. It's amazing to me.
After returning to the U.S.,
This is her
Stoddard
book.
moved on
And
with
it's
her
just
life,
for books, you know
pleased
it's
with her
good.
book and the dozens of quilts she brought home with her.
It's like having children, you know. They're all my favorite in some way or another, you know.
Oh, no, Mod Art, they're the Raleigh quilts.
They all have good qualities. There are some that I really am endeared to, and for different reasons. I mean, there's one that I loved, and I hung it in my house for quite a while, and it was a very, very simple village quilt. But the fabrics that were in it were just, you could tell they had been used over the years. It was really a recycled kind of a thing. And I love that just for the, you know, the story behind it. Even though I didn't know the real story, I could imagine the story, you know, that it was somebody's well-beloved.
And to say about this one, I mean, you look at that quilt and obviously it kind of has some staining on it. And, you know, of course she's talking about how much she loved it and it was well used. And I mean, quilts that we collect and love here, you know, we have the same feelings about them. But I kind of wonder about, you know, the folks in these villages where she's like probably buying the quilts off their beds, and they're like, sure, lady, if you want to buy my quilt, you know, I know that I have made a textile that's important to my family and my village, but if you want to buy it off my bed, thumbs up. I just wonder, like, you know, what their thought process is. Are they kind of like, who is this crazy Western woman who's come here to buy the quilts off our beds? Or do they have, maybe, I mean, nowadays I would say they probably do have that understanding of, cultural and ethnic textiles, and people in the West having a lot of interest in that. And so, there are markets that have grown up around that. But I mean, at the time where she's talking about this, I'm kind of wondering, like, what these women were really thinking when she's buying things directly from them.
A little quilt from the village, and it was a smaller size, so it was probably for a child or a teen or something. And then I have another one that a friend gave me that it was her wedding quilt, and it's fabulous with, it's
Wedding quilt.
it's extra large, and it's got, every bling on it, the little.
So again, the bride's quilts are always the fancy stuff. I mean, again, like, what an amazing, like, cross-cultural idea that we've got, these 19th and early 20th century idea of the bride's quilt, that you've got to have this really elaborate quilt in your dowry. And in these remote rural areas of India and Pakistan, it's the same thing. You've got to have this beautiful quilt. And also I'm thinking, what a good friend to give Patricia Stoddard her wedding quilt.
Mirrors and, very, very fine applique work and embroidery work on it. I think the thing that amazes me the most are little tiny mirrors. I mean, they're just so tiny, and then they put these little tiny holding stitches on them to keep them in place, so these mirrors aren't popping out all the time. And so when you get those kind, and they can be so small that you don't even notice that they're in there. But then when you get it you turn on a light, or in their case, if they don't have electricity, a campfire, these little mirrors just sparkle, and it's like magic. You just see all these reflections going all over. So that's the one that I think stands out to me.
But then one day, the Pakistani quilt makers reached back to find her.
And then in 2004, I got this email.
This story
And it
is great.
said, "Hello, we live in the desert of Pakistan. My mother and her relatives make quilts. Can you help us sell them?" And so, number one, I was blown away because I'd been to some of those villages, and they don't even have electricity or running water. I thought, I'm getting an email from some village that doesn't have electricity. But sure enough, it was true. So this was a Hindu village, very poor village, and one of the men of the village had actually gotten a job in Karachi and had access to a computer, and was somehow found the little website I had put up about the book, and so I started a connection with that village.
Excited to help, Stoddard became the sponsor for the Raleigh quilts in the United States by helping them participate in and sell their quilts at folk art markets, sending the money back to them via Western Union.
For a number of years, I took them to, there was an international folk art market in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's a fabulous place to sell, folk craft. And so from the proceeds that the women got from those quilts being sold, they started a school for their children. And this little village was pretty remote, so they didn't have a government teacher or anything like that. They just had to figure it out on their own. And so they got a teacher, they hired a teacher, and so we did that for 11 years, and so we were able to get a group of children from elementary school all the way to high school, and then hire a high school teacher. So it was great. It was great. I can't wait to see what those kids do.
The Santa Fe Desert School in Pakistan is named after the Santa Fe market where they sold the quilts. The women's skill in quilt making put many children through school. As cell phones and modern technologies entered the villages, the younger generation chose not to learn quilting, and they forgot their traditional patterns and quilting stitches used by their ancestors. Luckily, one Indian man found Stoddard's book on the internet. With the help of Stoddard's book, the villagers relearned their quilting heritage.
Well, one thing that happened was...
Can you believe this? This is the part that, the story about the school is like really touching. That she took these quilts to the Santa Fe market to help them fund this school for these children. this next part, I'm like, what?
And it made me realize a whole different facet of this was one time when I was at that folk art market, there was a man from India who came, and he also was making quilts from his village, from the India side. And we were just setting up, and I had never met him. I didn't know him, but he came running over to the booth, and he said, "Is it you? Is it you?" I said, "Well, I guess if you're looking for me, it is me." And he said, "I use your book. I use your book in my quilt making." And he said, I want to thank you because our village, we forgot our patterns, our quilt patterns. And so when I saw your book, I was able to, I went back and I could see them again and I could remember them. And when he was talking about, there was a stitch that I had a close-up of in the book. And he said, we had forgotten how to make that. And we found a very old lady who came and showed us and taught us how to do that stitch. And so it was just, it was so heartwarming because here I was helping them remember their own culture. And they had, moved and all that and had kind of forgotten as things had gone on. And then the cutest thing was, though, he said, he called my book his Bible, and he said, this is a Hindu community, and he said, I want you to know you are a goddess in our community. I said, nothing's better than that. A Hindu goddess, I like it.
In addition to selling the quilts, Stoddard also promotes them to create interest about the history and the plight of the people who make them. Hundreds of people visited the Fabric of Belonging display at the BYU Museum of Art.
To be able to see, so I've had other exhibits up in other places, and sometimes they're able to give, 1 or 2 rooms, because quilts take a lot of space to display. It's not like coins or something where you can get a whole lot in a small space. So quilts really take a lot of space, but for me to be able to see, there were almost 60 quilts, up on the wall and able to see them all at once. It was just amazing. It was amazing because if you stood in one spot in a room and just rotated around, you could see so much craftsmanship and so many different women's, imaginations and, color sensibilities and, pattern all within just, glancing around. And normally to see quilts, you kind of have to, at least in my house, I had to see them one at a time and hold them up, but to be able to see them all together was just wonderful. It was like being wrapped in wrapped up in them. It was nice.
Stoddard also works closely with the International Quilt Study Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Stoddard isn't sure where her quilt connection will go from here, but so far her desire to cover a bare white wall has generated a book, a school, the rebirth of traditional quilting, a market for South Asian-made quilts in the United States, and of course, her elevation to quilting goddess.
Yeah, that's the story.
So I love that. And Kara Wade is the person that was, helped make this documentary, and this is her channel. And like I said, it doesn't look like she's got a whole lot of other stuff on the channel like this, but please definitely, I'll put the link in here again. So, like and share the video. So yeah, is that not an amazing story? And I mean, I think about, there's crafts and techniques that I think we kind of rediscover, but the continuum of our history in the U.S., and the fact that we have books and all the stuff. Oh, no worries, Druid. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm wrapping up here, so, but no worries. You gotta go. But just the thought, we kind of rediscover stuff, and, there are people that, will examine textiles or old things, antique items, and learn how to make them and relearn stitches and techniques and things. But I don't know, we kind of take those things for granted. We're like, oh, you did some research, that's awesome, But these are folks, again, in an area that's like very cut off, and that they had kind of lost some of, their memory, and, just I guess because of the younger people in this village were just not picking up the craft. They were not, the skills of craftsmanship, and did not know how to do these things. And it's amazing to me that they got Patricia Stoddard's book, and we're like, this is what our village used to do. And then they find the one old lady that still knows how to do that stitch. That like blew my mind. I thought that was the coolest thing. So as soon as I get the book, we will revisit Raleigh quilts. Because like I said, it's, these are things I haven't studied very much, and I'm so interested in them. They're so interesting and pretty and colorful, and, I'm a more is more person. So I love to look at them. And, there is some consistency with some of those other types of, textiles that come out of India. And like Moderate Quilt said, the kanthas. So, am I saying that right, by the way? I'm sorry. The kanthas are another kind, the kwandi. I know the kwandis are made by a specific group of people. And I want to say they're culturally specific, because if I remember correctly, some of their history comes from maybe Africa and the Middle East, I think. I could be totally messing that up, but I think that's kind of the history of the Kwandi. Then, whereas the Raleigh quilts are that India-Pakistan border, and then Kantha is then a totally other kind of Indian quilt / textile. So I really would like to take some time and kind of look at all of those together and kind of compare them, because, they're, I don't know that they're necessarily like neighbors, but they're kind of in that same geographic area. So they kind of have some facets that are similar. So I'd really like to take some time and look at those. So as soon as I get my Raleigh quilts book, I can pull out some other stuff and we can look at that. So I was just very inspired by this video. And again, thank you to the individual who shared it, my dear friend. You know who you are. So I'm going to wrap up today. So like I said, Monday we're gonna do something eclipse related, so we'll see. So stay tuned for that. But I will come on at 2 p.m. Again, next Thursday will be canceled, regular time, but we'll figure something out. As far as a pop-up that Jill and I will do, and maybe something this weekend. So keep your eyes peeled. If you're just gonna be sewing this weekend, keep an eye out for for an alert that we might do something. So. Well, I am going to wrap up here. For some reason, traffic is very busy in front of my house. I keep hearing things, so I'm wondering if they're diverting and there's a bunch of traffic in front of my home. So I have to go check that out. Have a wonderful weekend, you guys. I look forward to seeing you definitely on Monday, but maybe this weekend. And take care.